"You don't belong here, sweetheart. This diner isn't for your kind." The words weren't whispered. They were spat, loud enough for every fork to freeze mid-air. 2 officers had just stormed in, uniforms crisp, authority heavy. Officer Mark Hanley, 38, his red hair catching the fluorescent light, stood with his jaw tight. Beside him, Officer Karen Doyle, 32, blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, already had her hand near the cuffs, and in the corner booth sat the man they wanted. Raymond Ray Cole, 45, broad as a steel beam, grey beard spilling down his chest, tattoos crawling up his arms like fire on old walls. His leather vest bore the words Hell's Angels World. He didn't move, didn't blink, but the insult hadn't been for him. It was for the woman standing beside him. Lena Brooks, 34, in her diner uniform, red dress, white apron, had just placed a steaming cup of coffee on the table. She smiled softly, professional, as if she'd poured coffee 1,000 times. Hanley stepped closer, his voice cutting like a blade. "Lady, people like you get hurt when you stick your nose in biker business. Step back before you regret it." Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now back to Lena. Her smile didn't vanish. She simply placed the pot back on the counter, slow and deliberate, as if the room itself had to match her rhythm. Ray's eyes flicked toward her once, steady, curious, like he was measuring something more dangerous than the officers in front of him. Karen Doyle snapped her cuffs free, the metal glinting under the noon light. "Raymond Cole, you're under arrest, and if this waitress gets in the way, we'll shut this place down. You hear me?" Then came the shove. Quick, dismissive. Hanley's hand swiped across the counter, knocking Lena's freshly poured cup to the floor. The mug shattered, coffee spreading across the tiles like a dark stain of contempt. The sound cracked the silence, sharper than any gunshot. The diner shifted. Customers stiffened. A man in his 50s near the jukebox muttered under his breath. A woman in her 30s raised her phone, hesitating to record. Even the hum of the neon lights seemed to hold its breath. Ray Cole didn't move. His hands, huge, scarred, deliberate, stayed flat on the table. Waiting. Calculating. And Lena? She crouched, gathered the broken pieces with a napkin. No tremor in her hand, no rush in her breath. She rose slowly, set the shards on the counter, and spoke. "He's my customer. He finishes his coffee before he leaves. That's how this diner works." Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than any order barked in that room. Karen Doyle's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, if you think serving him makes you safe, you're dumber than he looks." Lena didn't flinch. She stood tall, apron damp with spilled coffee, gaze steady as steel. For the first time, the diner didn't feel like a diner. It felt like a courtroom, every witness holding their breath, every second bending toward something bigger than lunch. And Lena Brooks, 34 years old, a woman dismissed as just a waitress, wasn't moving. Lena Brooks didn't answer the insult. She didn't rush to defend herself. She just stood there, apron damp, her hands folded in front of her. To everyone in that diner, she was a waitress who refused to step aside. To herself, she was something else entirely. Because Lena wasn't only 34 years old and serving coffee on Main Street, she was the CEO of Brooks Hospitality Group, a company that owned not one, but 19 diners across the Midwest. This chrome-lined cafe, with its turquoise booths and humming neon clock, was hers. She had built it from the ground up. But nobody in that room knew, not the officers, not even Ray Cole, and that was intentional. Some mornings, Lena pulled off the blazer, put away the boardroom voice, and stepped into the uniform. She called it her test days. Days to see if the world had changed since she was 16 and shoved out of a hotel lobby for looking like she didn't belong. The words had branded her memory like a scar that never faded. Today, as coffee dripped down her apron, she knew the answer was still the same. Officer Hanley leaned closer, lowering his voice but sharpening the edge. "You think you're helping him? You're putting your whole job on the line for a criminal. Walk away." Her calm didn't crack. She reached for a rag, wiped the counter in smooth circles, and said evenly, "This place doesn't throw people out because of how they look. Not while I'm here." From the corner, a man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair whispered to his wife, "She's crazy, taking his side." His wife frowned. "Or she's the only sane one in the room." Ray Cole shifted in his seat, finally breaking his silence. His voice rumbled low, like gravel dragged across asphalt. "You don't have to do this, lady. I've seen how this ends." Lena met his eyes. For a moment, two strangers spoke without words. One had spent years being profiled as a threat. The other had spent years being dismissed as invisible. And here they were, cornered by the same authority. Karen Doyle clicked her cuffs open wider, metal teeth hungry. "Enough. Stand up, Mr. Cole. And you," she jabbed a finger toward Lena. "Move aside, or you'll both ride downtown." The diner felt smaller by the second. The hum of the refrigerator in the back seemed louder. The scrape of a spoon against porcelain like thunder. Lena didn't budge. She set the rag down, her voice steady. "If you're going to arrest anyone, start with me. I served the coffee." A murmur rippled through the booths. The couple by the jukebox exchanged shocked glances. A man in his 50s shook his head. Someone else whispered, "She's protecting him." Phones tilted higher, recording. Hanley's patience cracked. He slammed a palm against the booth table, rattling the silverware. "Don't test us. We'll shut this diner down in 5 minutes flat. Health code, fire code, you name it." But Lena only folded her arms, eyes locked on him. She had been here before, different uniforms, same tone. They had tried to erase her with rules, with paperwork, with fake concern. But they had never faced her when she chose to stand her ground. And now, every second of silence weighed heavier. Every breath in that diner felt like the calm before a storm, because Lena Brooks wasn't moving. Not then, not ever. The silence didn't last. Officer Hanley straightened, his hand brushing the butt of his holstered gun, not drawing, not yet, but enough to remind everyone it was there. His voice rose, sharp and cold. "This isn't your call, lady. You're obstructing law enforcement. You want to lose your paycheck over some outlaw?" The words landed heavy, dripping with condescension. Paycheck. As if that was all she was. Lena Brooks, 34, didn't flinch. She set her palms flat on the counter, leaning just slightly forward. "This isn't about a paycheck. It's about respect." Karen Doyle sneered. "Respect? He's a felon. You're a waitress. Neither of you belong in a place that serves decent people." The insult hit harder than the spilled coffee. A woman near the door gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Another customer, mid-40s, muttered, "Did she just say that out loud?" A phone lifted higher, the red light of its camera glowing like a quiet alarm. Ray Cole shifted, muscles tightening beneath his leather vest. He muttered almost to himself, "Same story, different town." Lena heard him, and something flickered in her eyes, a memory. 17 years old, dressed in her Sunday best, waiting in a hotel lobby while her parents parked the car. A clerk had walked up, looked her over and said, "This area's for guests only." She had tried to explain. They hadn't listened. She had been escorted out to the sidewalk like she was dirt. That sting never left, and now here it was again, wrapped in different uniforms. Hanley slammed the table once more. Silverware clattered to the floor. "Enough, Cole. Stand up. Now, or I'll drag you out." Ray's jaw flexed, but he stayed seated. His hands remained where everyone could see them. He wasn't fighting. Not yet. And Lena? She moved first. Not fast, not reckless, just deliberate. She stepped between the officers and the booth, her red dress cutting like a line drawn in the sand. "You don't put your hands on him in here," she said evenly. "Not while I'm standing." The diner shifted again. Conversation stopped. Someone whispered, "She's protecting him." Another voice answered, "She's going to get herself arrested." But more phones were up now. A man in his late 30s angled his camera discreetly, whispering into the mic, "Downtown diner, live, cops harassing a customer and a waitress." This is happening. Karen's patience snapped. She grabbed Lena's wrist and yanked her aside. Not hard enough to bruise, but rough enough to humiliate. "Last warning, ma'am. Move or you're next." The gasp this time was collective. Even the jukebox seemed to stutter into silence. The air turned electric, heavy like storm clouds pressing down on the small chrome room. Lena slowly freed her wrist, her eyes never leaving Doyle's. No fear, no retreat, just steel. "You're making the mistake of your career," she said softly. And in that moment, the diner wasn't just a diner anymore. It was a stage, a courtroom, a battlefield where silence and dignity were her weapons. The storm hadn't broken yet, but everyone in that room could feel it coming. Lena didn't raise her voice. She didn't pull her wrist back with anger. She simply straightened, adjusting the apron at her waist as if Doyle's grip had been nothing more than a wrinkle in the fabric. Her silence was louder than any protest. Across the room, someone finally broke it. A man in his late 30s, thinning hair, plaid shirt, phone in hand, spoke louder than he intended. "Why are you grabbing her? She didn't do anything." The officers froze for half a beat. Cameras always changed the air. Hanley turned his head, scanning the room. 2 phones. No, 3. The red dots glowed like sparks in the crowd. Doyle hissed, "Put the phones away. This is a police matter." But nobody lowered their hand. Lena's eyes flicked toward the customers, then back to the officers. Her voice was calm, even, like she was reminding them of table manners instead of life and death. "You can't erase what people see. Not anymore." Ray Cole exhaled slowly, the sound heavy as gravel. He leaned forward, voice low but steady. "She's right. The world's watching." Hanley snapped. "You shut up, Cole. You've had enough protection from people like her." He shot Lena a glare. "You don't want to end up on the wrong side of this." The wrong side. She'd heard those words before. 24 years old, standing in a bank lobby, her loan paperwork in hand, while a manager told her, "People like you are high risk, safer if we deny it." She'd walked out with nothing but the sting of rejection and a plan to never ask permission again. And here it was again. Same tone, same dismissal. Lena inhaled once, steady. Then she placed the rag she had been holding onto the counter, folding it neatly in half. "You think this diner runs on fear?" she said quietly. "You're wrong. It runs on truth." Her words weren't for the officers. They were for the cameras, for the witnesses, for every diner guest whose eyes had widened at the spectacle unfolding like theatre. The room shifted again. A woman in her 40s near the window raised her voice now. "She's not the problem. You are." Another customer echoed, "Exactly. You're harassing her for doing her job." Doyle's face flushed. She jabbed a finger toward Lena. "She's obstructing justice. Arrest her." Hanley hesitated, just for a second, because the cameras were still up, because the room was no longer silent, because this wasn't just 2 officers in control of a situation. It was 2 officers under a spotlight. Lena didn't move. She simply folded her hands together in front of her apron, the picture of quiet defiance. She stood as if anchored to the floor itself, unshakable, unmovable. The officers exchanged a glance, frustration simmering just beneath their practiced authority. And the crowd? They weren't just watching anymore. They were bearing witness. Every second of silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap. But Lena Brooks, 34, dismissed as just a waitress, remained still. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. And in that silence, the whole diner leaned closer, waiting for the storm to break. The weight of silence snapped. From the far end of the diner, a man in his early 40s scraped back his chair. The sound cut through the air like chalk across a board. He stood, phone still in hand, eyes locked on the officers. His voice shook at first, but it grew steadier with each word. "I've been watching this whole time," he said, loud enough for every booth to hear. "She hasn't raised her voice once. She hasn't touched you. All she's done is stand her ground, and you grabbed her." Hanley turned toward him, jaw tightening. "Sit down, sir. This doesn't concern you." But the man didn't sit. His plaid shirt hung loose over work jeans, his voice gaining conviction. "It does concern me. It concerns everyone in here, because we're watching an officer harass a woman for doing her job." Murmurs rippled across the booths. A woman in her late 30s near the counter added, "He's right. I saw it too. She only poured coffee." Doyle's lips thinned into a line. "She interfered with an arrest. That's obstruction. Law is clear." The man shook his head, phone raised slightly higher. "Law or bias?" His words landed heavy, the kind that didn't need volume to cut. Lena still hadn't moved. Her hands rested on the counter, fingers laced loosely together, calm, grounded, watching the storm swirl around her without bending to it. Ray Cole's gravelly chuckle broke the tension for a split second. "You hear that? Even strangers see the truth." His eyes flicked toward Lena, respect flickering in the weathered lines of his face. Hanley's patience fractured. He stepped forward, his voice sharp, aiming to drown out the witnesses. "Put the phones away. Last warning. If you interfere with law enforcement, you'll all face charges." But the warning had the opposite effect. More phones rose. The glow of screens multiplied, reflections bouncing off chrome fixtures and glass windows. The diner was no longer just a room. It was a stage broadcast to the world outside. Lena breathed in slowly, shoulders lifting, then dropping in quiet rhythm. She remembered another stage once, 29 years old, her first major hotel pitch, standing in front of a boardroom of executives twice her age. One of them had laughed under his breath. She looks more like housekeeping than ownership. She hadn't answered then either. She had let the work, the contracts, the results speak louder than her voice. And today she was letting silence do the same. The man in plaid spoke again, firmer now. "She's not the problem, you are. We all see it. Every second of it." For the first time, Doyle faltered. Her eyes darted to the phones, to the witnesses, to Lena's steady face that refused to break. The power dynamic was shifting, subtle but undeniable. Hanley leaned close to Doyle, muttering under his breath. But even whispers carried in the hushed room. "We need to end this fast." Lena caught the words. She straightened, her voice low but clear. "End it the right way, or it will end you." The crowd murmured again. The storm was building, and everyone in that chrome diner knew the break was coming. The diner had shifted sides. Customers weren't just eating anymore. They were witnesses. Phones lined up like courtroom cameras. And in the center of it all stood Lena, apron damp with spilled coffee, eyes locked steady on the two uniforms who refused to retreat. Hanley's patience broke first. His voice cracked through the diner like a whip. "You think standing in front of a thug makes you noble? You're nothing but a waitress protecting trash. And if you keep this up, you'll lose more than your shift. You'll lose this entire diner." The words fell heavy, cruel, and calculated. Customers gasped. One woman muttered, "Did he just threaten to shut her down?" Another voice whispered, "That's not how the law works." But still, the threat hung in the air, toxic and undeniable. Doyle stepped forward, feeding the fire. "He's right. We can find a dozen violations in this dump before lunch ends. Fire hazards, expired permits, you name it, and this place could be locked and boarded by tomorrow morning." The cruelty wasn't hidden. It was broadcast. Every word captured by glowing screens, every syllable sinking like poison into the silence. Lena's chest rose slowly. She inhaled, exhaled, and placed both hands on the counter, grounding herself as if anchoring to steel. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, almost gentle. "You confuse threats with power. That's your mistake. It wasn't loud, but it carried. Every booth heard it. Every camera caught it. And every officer in that diner felt it." Ray Cole leaned back, his deep laugh cutting through the tension like gravel rolling down a hill. "You hear her? She's got more backbone than both of you combined." Hanley snapped toward him. "Shut up, Cole. One word from me and you'll be dragged out in cuffs." Ray didn't flinch. He just nodded toward Lena. "Then you'll have to drag her too, and that's a show the whole city will watch." Murmurs swelled again. Customers weren't whispering anymore. They were speaking in open defiance. "This isn't right. They can't just close a place because they want to. She hasn't done a thing." Phones shifted, capturing every angle. The chrome ceiling lights reflected the glow of lenses, multiplying them until it felt like dozens of eyes bore down on the two uniforms. Lena's silence held for a long moment. Then she spoke again, calm, deliberate. "You walked in here looking for control, but you lost it the moment you tried to humiliate me." Her words were a blade, sharp, precise, undeniable. Doyle's face flushed crimson. "Enough games. Arrest her. Now." Hanley hesitated, just for a second. Because the diner no longer felt like his ground, the weight of witnesses pressed down heavier than his badge. And Lena Brooks, 34 years old, dismissed as nothing more than a waitress, stood like stone, calm, unmoved, ready for the storm she knew was coming. The diner's hum was gone. No clatter of forks, no hiss from the grill. Just the weight of 100 unsaid words pressing down on chrome tables and vinyl booths. And then Doyle moved. With a swift, angry hand, she reached across the counter and ripped Lena's order pad from her apron pocket. Pages fluttered to the floor, scattering like torn pages of dignity. Pens clattered against the tiles. Doyle held the pad high, her voice sharp enough to cut. "You're done here. This place is finished. Interfere again, and you'll be shut down before nightfall." The moment cracked like glass under pressure. Guests gasped audibly. A woman near the window shouted, "That's theft." A man closer to the counter muttered, "They can't do that. She hasn't broken a single law." Phones tilted higher, screens glowing like torches in the dark. Hanley doubled down, stepping beside Doyle. His hand shoved Lena's coffee pot across the counter. It crashed against the wall, shattering, brown liquid streaking down chrome. He leaned close, venom in his words. Look around. You think these people will remember you as a hero? No, they'll remember you as the waitress who got this dump shut down. Every eye turned to Lena. She didn't flinch. She didn't reach for the broken glass or the scattered pages. She lifted her chin slightly, meeting Hanley's glare with the calm weight of someone who had seen this all before. Her voice was steady, a quiet blade through the noise. You just made the biggest mistake of your career. The room exhaled in one collective shiver. Ray Cole finally shifted, his broad frame leaning forward, tattoos flexing with the movement. His voice rumbled low, but every word carried. I told you, officer, you don't want to pick this fight. Not with her. Doyle spun toward him, furious. Shut your mouth, you're a criminal. Ray smiled faintly, his teeth flashing like steel under fluorescent light. Maybe, but she's not, and the whole world can see what you just did. The crowd erupted in murmurs, louder than ever. A middle-aged man near the jukebox spoke directly to his phone, voice trembling with outrage. Downtown diner. Officers just trashed the counter, ripped her notepad. This is happening live. For the first time, Hanley faltered. His eyes darted to the phones, to the growing circle of witnesses. But Doyle's pride wouldn't bend. She threw the notepad onto the counter with a smack and barked, Last chance. Move out of the way or you both leave in cuffs. Lena picked up one of the scattered pages, smoothed it gently between her fingers, then placed it back on the counter. Her silence lingered until the room leaned into it. Then, softly but firmly, she spoke. You mistook silence for submission. That was your last mistake. Every camera caught it. Every witness felt it. And in that diner, the storm finally touched the ground. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and tension. Shards of glass glistened across the floor. Doyle's threats still rang sharp in the air. But Lena Brooks didn't bend. Instead, she reached calmly into her apron pocket, not for the torn notepad, not for a rag, but for her phone. One swipe, one tap, and she lifted it to her ear. The officers stiffened. The customers leaned closer. Silence stretched like a rope pulled tight. Activate diner protocol, Lena said, her voice steady, unshaken. Log everything, live feed to corporate, tag this incident, law enforcement misconduct. The line clicked. A voice came through, crisp and professional. Confirmed, Miss Brooks. Protocol engaged. Cameras linked. Recording secured. Hanley frowned. Doyle blinked. Customers exchanged confused looks. A whisper broke the quiet. Corporate? Did she just say corporate? Ray Cole's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition crossing his weathered face. He leaned back, muttering under his breath, Knew you weren't just pouring coffee. Lena ended the call, placed the phone gently on the counter, and folded her arms. Proceed if you want, but understand you're not the only ones recording anymore. A collective murmur rippled through the diner. Phones shifted, catching her face, her stance, her unshaken calm. The energy had shifted. Doyle hissed, trying to regain ground. You think calling some hotline scares us? This is real authority. That phone won't stop us from shutting you down. Lena didn't answer. She didn't need to. The man in plaid, the one who had stood earlier, spoke again, louder now. She just said corporate. You realize what that means? She's not just a waitress, she's connected. Hanley barked, Sit down, sir. Last warning. But the momentum was already slipping. Another customer, a woman in her 40s, lifted her phone higher. We all heard her. She's got backup, and you, her eyes cut toward the officers, you're the ones outnumbered. The room buzzed like a hive waking up. Every witness became a juror. Every phone became a gavel. Ray Cole chuckled again, gravel thick in his throat. Told you, officers, she's playing a longer game than you ever imagined. Doyle slammed her cuffs onto the counter, metal clinking sharp against chrome. Enough. Both of you. Now. Lena didn't move. She placed her palms flat on the counter, steady as bedrock. Her voice came low, deliberate. Every second you stand here, your mistake grows. And when this recording reaches the right hands, you'll wish you had walked away. Gasps rippled, murmurs swelled, phones zoomed closer. Hanley's face reddened. He tried to summon authority, but the weight of eyes, human and digital, pressed down harder than his badge. For the first time, he looked small. The diner buzzed with whispers, screens glowing brighter, the tension boiling. Doyle's cuffs still clinked on the counter. Hanley's jaw clenched like a trap ready to snap. But Lena Brooks didn't rush. She took her time. She smoothed the damp apron over her waist, untied the strings, and laid it carefully across the counter. Then she looked straight into Doyle's eyes, calm, unshaken. "You think you're threatening a waitress?" The room leaned in. Phones caught every breath, every angle. Her voice dropped lower, sharper. "But you're threatening the owner." The words cracked through the diner like a verdict. For a beat, no one moved. Then murmurs rippled, sharp and fast. "Owner? Did she just say owner? Wait, she runs this place?" Hanley scoffed, but his voice lacked weight. "You expect us to believe that, in that apron?" Lena didn't blink. She slid her phone across the counter, tapped the screen once, and turned it toward them. On display, the Brooks Hospitality dashboard, a corporate account listing 19 locations across 3 states, all stamped with her name, CEO Lena M. Brooks. Gasps filled the diner. One woman whispered, "She's not bluffing." Another man muttered, "Oh my God, she owns the chain." Ray Cole's grin spread slow and wide. He leaned forward, his voice carrying gravel and amusement. "Told you she wasn't just pouring coffee." Doyle's face flushed, anger colliding with panic. "Even if you own this diner, it doesn't change the fact." "It changes everything," Lena cut in, her tone slicing clean. "Because this isn't a waitress you tried to humiliate. This is a CEO. The CEO of the very diner you just trashed. And everything you've done," she gestured toward the shattered mug, the ripped notepad, the witnesses, "is logged, recorded, and now public." The weight of her words sank like iron into the floor. Customers nodded, some even clapping softly, the sound hesitant but growing. Phones zoomed closer, broadcasting the truth in real time. Hanley's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. His voice wavered. You think this will stick? We were enforcing the law." Lena's eyes never left his. Her reply was quiet, but it carried like thunder. "No, you were enforcing your bias, and now the law will enforce itself on you." The diner erupted, not in chaos, but in murmurs of agreement, in the unified hum of witnesses who had just seen the tables turn. Doyle's hand hovered over her cuffs, but for the first time, hesitation flickered in her eyes. She wasn't holding control anymore. She was holding evidence against herself. And Lena Brooks, 34, no longer hidden behind an apron, stood revealed. Not just as a woman in red, not just as someone serving coffee, but as the black CEO who owned the room, the chain, and the story. The silence that followed wasn't fear anymore, it was respect. The diner had turned. The power wasn't with the uniforms anymore. It was with the woman who had just untied her apron and revealed her crown. Hanley's face drained of colour. His voice, once sharp and commanding, now stammered on the edges. Even if you own this place, it doesn't excuse you for interfering. You'll regret this." But the words rang hollow. Everyone knew it. Doyle shifted uneasily, her grip on the cuffs faltering. Her eyes darted toward the crowd, toward the rows of glowing phones, toward the witnesses whose expressions had sharpened from curiosity to open disapproval. She wasn't feared anymore. She was recorded. A man in his 50s by the window raised his phone high. "This is the CEO of this diner chain, and these cops are trashing her business live on camera. Everyone needs to see this." His voice carried, steady, deliberate. Others joined in. "She's the owner." She warned them. They crossed the line. Murmurs grew into voices, voices layered into a chorus, and the chorus tilted the balance of the room. Ray Cole finally moved. He pushed back from the booth, the leather of his vest creaking, tattoos shifting across his arms. His voice came out low and steady, gravel turned into iron. "You just picked a fight with a woman who owns more in this city than you ever will, and you tried to break her in her own house." He leaned forward, resting his massive hands on the table. His stare burned into the officers. Bad choice. The crowd responded, not with laughter, not with cheers, but with the kind of hum that fills a stadium before the final call. Hanley's composure cracked. He adjusted his belt, tugged at his badge, searching for footing he no longer had. "You're all making a mistake siding with her. You don't know what she's hiding." Lena didn't react. She let the silence answer for her. A woman near the jukebox, mid-30s, called out, "We don't need to know. We saw what you did. That's enough." Doyle finally snapped, her voice cracking under pressure. "Shut those cameras off, all of you." But not a single hand lowered. Instead, more phones tilted, more eyes fixed. The weight of the room pressed harder. Lena placed her palms flat on the counter again, calm and resolute. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. This diner doesn't belong to fear. It belongs to truth, and everyone in this room just witnessed yours. The line landed like a hammer. Customers nodded. Ray Cole's faint grin widened, the first sign of relief on his weathered face. Even the air in the diner seemed to shift, lighter, freer, as if the building itself exhaled. Hanley and Doyle stood in uniforms that suddenly looked smaller, badges that suddenly felt heavier. Their authority wasn't power anymore. It was panic, and Lena Brooks, the black CEO they had dismissed as a waitress, stood unshaken, the center of a storm she now controlled. Lena didn't let the moment drift. She knew hesitation was where bullies found breath. She leaned forward just slightly, her palms still anchored to the chrome counter. "Corporate," she said, calm and deliberate, speaking into her phone again. "Confirm escalation protocol. Flag today's incident. Forward to state oversight and internal legal counsel." The voice on the other end replied without pause. "Confirmed, Miss Brooks. Documentation live. State authority notified. System cross-check initiated." Every syllable was captured by the glowing screens. Every word slammed against the silence. Hanley's lips parted, confusion breaking through his mask. "What? What did you just do?" Lena's eyes locked on his, steady cold. "I just removed your shield. By the time you walk out that door, your names are in 3 systems, logged with misconduct and under legal review." The crowd stirred. Phones tilted closer. A woman gasped audibly. A man muttered, "She's dismantling them in real time." Doyle barked, desperation slipping into her tone. "You can't do that! You don't have authority over us." Lena straightened, slow, deliberate, her voice dropping like a verdict. "I don't need authority over you. I need accountability. And that has already started." Her words were the strike, but her silence after was the echo. Ray Cole chuckled again, deeper this time, shaking his head. "She warned you, didn't raise her voice once, and you still dug your own graves." Hanley's hands twitched at his belt, his voice wavering between anger and fear. "This isn't over." "It is," Lena replied evenly, "for you." Then she lifted the phone again. One last order. "Effective immediately. Bar them from every Brooks location. No service, no access, no welcome." The line clicked. A single confirmation tone chimed back, "Executed." The sound was simple, but in that chrome diner, it hit like a gavel slamming down. The customers erupted, not with cheers, not yet, but with stunned murmurs. One man whispered, "She just banned them from their own city's diners." Another louder, "That's power without shouting." Doyle's face crumpled in disbelief. Hanley's eyes darted to the doors, to the windows, to the dozens of phones recording every tremor of their composure collapsing. They had walked in as the law. They now stood as defendants in a courtroom made of chrome and witnesses. And Lena Brooks, no apron, no disguise, only truth, delivered judgment not with fists or shouts, but with the weight of authority she had always carried. Her final words in that moment cut through the room like steel. "You tried to erase me in my own house. Now this house has erased you." The diner fell into silence again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was awe. Hanley and Doyle stood frozen, the weight of their uniforms dragging heavier than ever. The room wasn't theirs anymore. Every phone, every pair of eyes in that chrome diner had judged them guilty long before the courts would. Lena Brooks didn't gloat, she didn't smirk, she simply folded her arms, standing in quiet command. "Pick up your pride and leave," she said, her tone even, final. "You've done enough damage." Hanley's jaw clenched, but his voice faltered. "This isn't over." "It is," Lena replied, steady as bedrock, "because the moment you stepped in here, the story stopped being yours." The words dropped like stone into still water, rippling through the diner. Guests nodded, some whispering in agreement. A woman near the door whispered to her husband, "She just dismantled them." Another voice added, "Without even shouting." Doyle slammed the cuffs back onto her belt, but her eyes stayed low, refusing to meet the cameras. Together, the 2 officers turned and walked out, past the phones, past the witnesses, past the truth they could never bury. The door closed behind them. The diner exhaled as one. For a moment, silence held. Then the applause began. Tentative at first, then swelling, until the chrome walls vibrated with it. Strangers clapped, some even stood. A few guests shouted, "That's justice!" Ray Cole rose from his booth at last, towering, his leather vest gleaming under the lights. He gave Lena a nod, respectful, deep, the kind earned, not given. "You didn't just shield me," he said, gravel thick in his tone. "You shielded everyone who's ever been treated like dirt. They'll remember that." Lena inclined her head once, no more. "Drink your coffee while it's hot," she said simply. The moment ended there, on her terms. 24 hours later, the Chrome Diner on Main Street didn't just open for breakfast, it became a fortress. 300 motorcycles lined the block, chrome and thunder rumbling as engines idled in solidarity. Bikers, men and women, leather and denim, tattoos and scars, stood shoulder to shoulder. They weren't there to cause chaos. They were there to protect. Inside, customers stared in awe as the roar of bikes filled the street like a living wall. Phones captured the scene. The woman who had shielded one biker now shielded by hundreds. And Lena Brooks? She poured the first cup of coffee of the morning with the same steady hands. Her voice, quiet but resolute, became the closing line of the story. Justice isn't noise, it's action. And silence isn't weakness, it's power when you know who you are. The cameras caught it. The world remembered it. Because the black CEO who had once been mistaken for a waitress had just shown everyone, dignity doesn't shout, it stands, and when it stands, it wins.